constantly needing perfection and leaving no space for yourself to make mistakes. You can't level up. We only level up through making mistakes. Michelle Pollak.
Welcome to Casa De Confidence, a podcast for you. You'll hear some incredible women
and some awesome, cool dudes
going confidently in the direction of their dreams and living in the purpose of their heart.
You're our host,
Julie DeLucca-Collins, and you are our sidekick. Hashtag handsome hot husband.
That again.
And the producer of the show.
That I am.
I am an author, speaker, coach, dreamer, and most of all,
we help people go in the direction of their dreams
and support them on their purpose. So pull up a chair,
grab a drink,
and make yourself at home because our casa
is your casa. Welcome back to Casa De Confidence, where we've been growing our house's confidence since 2020.
Very interesting. Hey, I have a little statistic for you.
You have a statistic?
Yeah, you know I like those.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So did you know that in a recent article, the Washington Post, people-pleasing behaviors, right?
Yes.
Are mostly done by women. A recent government, survey found that about half, 49% of Americans say they would self-identify as people pleasers.
I am. Including
14% said they would 56% of women are more likely than men at 42%.
Well, you know why men don't categorize themselves as people pleasers?
Because they're not as self-aware?
No. I was going to say because most of them have a woman in their life and there's no pleasing them.
Oh, my God. That's rude. Rude.
Woo. Sorry, that was...
Don't worry, ladies.
What?
He's got it coming.
What am I going to get?
Dinner, I guess.
Oh, you're going to please me with dinner?
Well, there's no pleasing you sometimes, Daniel.
Really? I love everything that you cook.
Really?
Not that it's your job to cook. I'm just saying.
Well, sometimes.
Anyway.
One of us has to cook, although I haven't been very cooky lately.
You know, I joke, of course. There's, you know what? I love pleasing you.
Yeah, because you're a people pleaser.
Oh.
You're more of a people pleaser than I am. Hey, did you know that one of the biggest gender gaps on this topic, right? Americans say that they feel responsible for how other people feel. Well, about 1/3 of men say that they often experience this, but half of women said that they do. So I think that this is something that we need to talk about more. We are not responsible for the way that people feel.
Okay.
Right? We are only responsible of the things that we think and the things that then we feel because of what we're thinking, because our thoughts drive our feelings. And we can say something very innocuous to someone, something very plain, no meaning behind it. But because that person has their unconscious bias, their own little story, you know, the baggage we carry in life, their beliefs, their self-esteem, good or bad, right? They're going to interpret that in a very different way from how we mean it.
I understand that. And
I think that that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, and it causes them a lot of I would say pain, but more importantly, you know, angst, because we think people are out to get us. Oh, that person meant it this way, or that person, you know, did not, whatever, you know, fill in. Well, you know what? I'm going to use myself as an example. Someone, if you're noticing my voice, I've had cough variant asthma. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for it to go away. But I did not go to this event that I was supposed to go to. I was given the option to stay home. And it was a very, you know, nice option. But when I was first told, I was very angry and I was very hurt. And there were a lot of these feelings because I thought, well, they don't want me there, or what they're thinking this, and again, my brain went to all of these different places. And whether or not they were meant like that or not, I am the only person who is in charge of what I'm thinking and feeling. And, sometimes we believe the worst in people, or we believe that, again, this is how people mean it, when maybe we need to give people the benefit of the doubt and know that that's not how it's intended.
Right. I mean, if someone could be doing something purely because it is, they're trying to please you, or trying to respect you. And you could take it the complete opposite and think, like you just said, oh, maybe they just don't want me there.
Right.
And,
and
that's the complete opposite of the intention of the gesture.
Right. However, because I'm certainly not a people pleaser, I do have more of this masculine energy at times, right? I have to call it like I see it. And I had a conversation with a person and I said, hey, I just want you to know that when you said, I thought about it and you should not come to this event. And they did not even give me an option, right? They did not even make it a discussion. And I said, I think that, you had your reasons. And I know that and I want to assume that your reasons are because you care for me, you want me to be okay, and feeling all coming from a good place. But here's where I had to stand up for myself, because this is what I was thinking. Being the person who I am, I would have appreciated more if the conversation went and said, hey, I don't want you to feel obligated to come to the event, right? And given me the opportunity and the choice to make the right choice, which is not going. But I really feel like at times, right, we give somebody the hot dog because we love eating hot dogs, but maybe that person is more into like hamburgers. And I think that we need to take into consideration when we speak to somebody else who the person is, so that we can not walk on eggshells, but understand, right, how our message can land. I know that that's something that a lesson that I keep trying to work through. Like with you, sometimes I'll talk to you or say something to you because I'm just in a rush, or I'm just in a way that, kind of being Julie, very DI on the disc scale, right? Or very 7 on the Enneagram, that it's kind of like, oh, FOMO, right? But you're not like that. So my way of communicating with you is going to land differently. And relationships, again, is this dance of learning to dance together, as opposed to trying to step over each other's toes because we don't realize how you're dancing or what beat you're moving to. Oh, I like that analogy.
Are you trying to get me to go dancing with you?
I'm not trying to get you to go dancing with you. I'm just unpacking a lot of this for myself, because, the work is never done for us. We never arrive at enlightenment. We continue to evolve and shed things that don't serve us, pick up things that may be better for us. And I think that people pleasing is definitely something that it's timely in this world. And it's also important for us as women in these times in which, let's face it, we face going back on a lot of our freedoms as women. And we have to learn to stand up for ourselves, because the traits of a people pleaser include low self-esteem. We accommodate everybody else's need. We undermine our own needs. We kind of go with the flow when we don't want to. And then we resent people, right? Rarely says no. We value the praise from others as opposed to the praise from ourselves. And then we take blame when we're not at fault. And we have to stop to make excuses for the faults that other people have, because people will have some of their shortcomings, but we cannot say, oh, but that's just that person. This is how they are, or this is how they were brought up, or they're never going to change. We need to know these things because this is self-awareness. And the other piece, the bottom line is that at the root of people pleasing, right, may be that's how we were taught in an early age that we were going to receive unconditional love in those very early years, that we had to smile and perform, or smile and do the right thing, and in order for people to have that love and attention consistently. So that's all I'm saying there.
Wow, we got right into the serious this week.
Well, and one last thing that I'm going to say.
Okay.
And I want people to, because this is a journey we have to do together, I want you to think about, if you think of yourself as a people pleaser, ask yourself a question, because there's another similar syndrome, right, other than people pleasing, that sometimes we think, well, I'm a people pleaser, but maybe we're not. Maybe you are a martyr. And the difference, right, and they're similar, but the martyr, make sure you know that you're sacrificing yourself for you, right? So like, if I'm the martyr in this relationship, I will say, well, I'm not going to be able to do this because I have to cook dinner for you. And again, a lot of time people fall into this category. And when we do, then we're really committed to being unhappy because we're trying to please, but we want people to know that, hey, I am doing this for you, and, woe is me. And you're not going to accept help from others. You're, again, a lot of things that this leads to. So that's all. That's all you got for me?
No, it's just something you just said.
What did I say?
Well, accept help from others. Something you talked about this morning.
Oh, you know what? I said that not thinking about our conversation from this morning.
Oh.
So maybe you are a martyr, Dan. Oh, my God. This is a great conversation. Hey, by the way, Michelle, our guest from today, she started with a passion for acting, but found her true calling in creating and producing. And she's done such amazing work. She worked in Rent, Avenue Q. Also, she transitioned to other endeavors. But the one thing that I really love is that she's working with individuals. And, we talked about in this episode about the epidemic of people pleasing. We also talked about balancing energies. And as a high achiever, I will tell you that my energy tends to be more masculine because I just sometimes kind of bulldoze people, right? But that's my high achieving, where I need to work on having more nurturing and empathy, which is really essential to having a healthier work environment and overall life. Make sure that you listen to this episode, my friends. We're going to jump right into it because we talk a lot about these conversations. Redefine your success, seek out supportive relationship, and learn to say no when necessary, because these are important things in our journey. And don't forget, Michelle's an amazing guest, and I am so pleased to have her here.
All right, here's Michelle and Julie.
Welcome back to another episode of Confident You Radio and the Casa De Confidence podcast. Today, I am really excited to welcome Michelle Pollak today, and she has supported over 100 executive and leaders in advertising, entertainment law, and academia, marketing, and nonprofit sector, as well as the multi-passionate entrepreneurs and innovators. Her clients have been promoted multiple times, shifted culture within the organization, and successfully launched new companies and won numerous awards. I want to talk to Michelle because leadership is one of the things that I believe begins with leading ourselves. And in order for us to have a successful career or successful business, we really have to start with in what we are doing. Michelle also came from the entertainment industry. So I want to kind of unwrap that more, but let's welcome her to the show. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Julie. It's so great to be here.
Well, I have been looking forward to our conversation. I know that you're not too far from me here in New England.
That's
which
right.
is,
I'm in New Jersey,
yes.
which is something I never thought I'd say in my entire life, that I live in New Jersey, but I do.
Yeah. But you're originally from Massachusetts, right?
I am originally from Massachusetts.
That's
That's
right.
right.
I love meeting people who are close by because, by the way, I spoke to someone in Spain today, which is exciting, but it's always fun to talk to people who are close by because I know that the possibility of me having coffee with them is very good.
Yeah. It's great.
You were a creative executive on television for shows like The New Adventures of Old Christine. I love that show.
So good, isn't it?
So good.
Dreyfus is the best.
Yeah. And then you also help with Grease Live, which, by the way, Grease has been one of my top 5 movies forever. So, of course, I am a fan of the stuff that you have done and the stuff that you're working on now. But for the listeners who are just meeting you, tell us a little bit more about your journey.
So I actually, I started out as a performer. I went to college for theater. I thought I was going to, I was sure that that was my route. I was going to be an actress for the rest of my life. And then there was a time, it was a few years into my time in New York City, and I was at a callback for a national tour of something. And I just something in me snapped. And I just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to leave New York City to go cartwheel across a stage 8 shows a week. I had this sense of there's something more that I'm wanting. And the truth about acting and theater is if you don't want it with all of your soul, don't do it. It's the kind of thing that's the kind of career that you really need to. And I knew that. I knew I needed to want it if I was really going to make it happen. And so I ended up getting onto the other side of things. I really felt in that moment, I think the show I was called back for was Annie, Get Your Gun.
Ooh,
and I was
love that.
It's a great show, but I wanted to be a part of creating new stuff.
Yeah.
I got excited at the prospect of creating new stuff. So I ended up, I did a bunch of internships and I landed with the producers of Rent. And I worked with them opening Avenue Q on Broadway. And we opened Baz Luhrmann's La Boheme on Broadway. And
Michelle, you were in New York the same time I was. We probably ran into each other. I was like one of these Broadway geeks. I probably was at Rent at least once a month, by the way. So,
oh my gosh, you were really a Rent head.
Yeah, I was a Rent head. Yeah, I have a girlfriend. Her name is Cheryl, and oh my goodness, we have seen so many shows together, but Rent is the one thing that really brought us together.
When I was a senior in college, I went to Northwestern and I was a theater major. And my senior year, I lived with 4 other girls and they wanted to kill me because I played that album on repeat non-stop. And to this day, they make fun of me for it.
Oh no! By the way, that is probably most of the songs from Rent are some of my most played out of all the gazillion songs I have in my iPod or my phone rather. I guess it's not an iPod anymore. Yeah, my husband's like, "Oh, we're listening to Rent again."
So it was really I saw the original cast of Rent.
Yeah, me too.
It was like when I went to work for Kevin and Jeffrey, that was like, oh my God, this is this is it.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing experience and I loved working with them. And, but I also felt, well, it's so funny to look back, right? Because I know what I felt then, and now I can see it from where I am now. There was a lot of fear around actually getting to the next level, which was producing myself and raising money. That's not what I told people at the time, but now I can say I was so terrified of the idea of investing other people's money in a show and going through that whole process. And I wanted to move up in the world or, advance. And in theater, you kind of like, you're the producer or you're not. So that was the next step for me. And I also met a guy who lived in Los Angeles and we were long distance for a year. And I decided to move out to LA and try my hand in television. Because there was a ladder I could move up, right? And that you'll be happy to know that the romance worked out. We are now married, which was insane.
I love it.
I can't
I love that.
I moved across the country for somebody, but I did. And apparently it was the right choice. It was a good choice. But I went to work at CBS and, as I was at CBS, I kept feeling like something is missing. Something is missing. I had this just gut feeling of there's more out there for me.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had this dream that I was going to be a big time executive in entertainment. And I really, really struggled to let go of that dream. And it's not even, I think it stopped being my dream a long time before I stopped going after it. I had all these other ideas of all of these things I wanted to do, but all the reasons in the world that I couldn't get them done. There were so many things that I just wouldn't even entertain because I had to be responsible and I had to have a real job. And,
Sounds familiar.
So, and at a certain point, I was so unhappy, but I wouldn't let it go. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let this idea that I was supposed to be a big time executive in entertainment go, because if I let it go, in my mind, I was failing.
Yeah. That happens to so many, especially women, I think, that we define ourselves by the role and it's not a good fit, or we know that it's time to move on from that dream or that place where we're at. And we don't do it because, we're so afraid.
Yeah. I mean, I had that feeling when I decided to stop performing as well. This feeling of worrying about what everybody else was going to think, that I didn't hit the milestones that I intended to hit and I wasn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
But what I now know about that time in my life is I was not actually defining success by what I felt and needed and wanted in my life at that time. I was defining it by somebody 10 years earlier, right? So I was evolving and growing and changing, but I wasn't allowing my ideas of who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do to evolve and grow and change with me. So the universe works in mysterious ways. And I got laid off when I was 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
Which was a whole other podcast, Julie, right?
That's another podcast for sure.
That's another podcast.
Yeah.
But I got to be home with my first daughter. And right when I started interviewing to go back to work, because right around the time she was a little over a year, I decided I was ready to go back to work. Surprise, I was pregnant with my second. So I started interviewing to go back to work. And every time it was down to like me and some single guy who didn't have a family at home and they always got the job.
Yep.
I was always relieved. And I knew there was a message in there for me.
Yeah.
So at the same time that I started, I had been told for years and years, you should be a coach, you should be a coach. And I really didn't even know what that meant. I was like, a life coach isn't a real thing. I don't even know what that means.
Yes. I had that same approach to all of this. I'm like, what does it mean? Like, people are going to not know what it is. And like, they're going to think I'm crazy.
Yes. A life. What is
life coach? Right.
A weird thing, but it turns out it is a real thing.
It is.
And I had started doing some exploring. And I got a phone call to be a creative consultant on Grease Live. And I thought to myself, this is my opportunity I've been away from this for 5 years. I'm going to dip my toe back in this water and see if do I want to let go of this completely? And I had an amazing experience working on Grease Live. I'm super proud of that project. And I was very clear I did not want to go back into entertainment. And so while I was working on Grease Live, I actually started going back to school for coaching, and the rest is history. Here we are.
Wow. I have to say, that the one thing that really calls to me about this is that the things that you were going through are pretty much the same things that so many of us, right, tend to go through. And yet we need to normalize that we're not the only ones. And we need to really have these conversations, Michelle, because many people think that they're the only ones. Did you feel that, nobody would understand what you were going through?
It's so true. I mean, there were so many facets of what I was experiencing. The fear about taking risks and leaving my job, the fear of failure if I abandoned the dream that I had, and this constant feeling of emptiness that I had going to work, doing the thing I thought I was supposed to want to do. But really, this lack of fulfillment and dissatisfaction. And it was like, people were like, oh my God, you have this, sexy job. And it was like, okay, great. My life looks perfect on paper, but I feel like a fraud, and I think there's so many people who have that feeling of, why don't I feel as good as my life looks?
Yeah. Did you feeling like a fraud? Did you trust yourself at the time?
I would say no. I would say I did not trust myself. I would say I was looking externally for a lot of answers and a lot of support. I was constantly, when I would have an idea, I would go to somebody else to kind of run it by them, because I could never just say. And the interesting thing is, when I decided to become a coach, I didn't tell anyone. I mean, I talked about it with my husband.
Oh my God, yeah.
But it was interesting. I trusted I was like, I'm going to try this. And it was also something I could try. I was doing this consulting gig, and I went and took the first course, and I was like, let's see what happens. And then I went to that first course, and it was like a light bulb, went on. And I was so clear that this was the thing I was meant to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was my age. I was in my late 30s, and I often find that women tend to, in their late 30s, early 40s, there is a trust that comes over us that doesn't exist for us earlier in our lives.
Agreed.
Not that it's not available to us, but I think there's so much external noise when we're younger.
Right. And I think that we can take risks and say, for instance, say to someone, I don't think so, because we already gained the experience of what can happen, right? Like if I go and say yes to everyone, I know I'm going to burn out, or I think I'm going to hate that thing. So no, I'm going to say from the get-go, no, I don't want to be involved, and set those boundaries, or say, you know what, when I took a risk last time, it paid off. Or I took a risk and it didn't pay off, but I learned these lessons and other doors opened for me. And I think that that's what starts to happen, but we really need to be aware of what is it that is happening as well. And many people don't trust themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's not, we as women in particular have been socialized to look outside of ourselves for answers. I mean, it's part of the reason there's this people-pleasing epidemic is because we, for many, many years, had to look to men to survive. We could not support ourselves. We couldn't earn money. We couldn't own land. We couldn't get a bank account. We couldn't vote. We couldn't do so many of these things that are necessary for survival without a man. And so we needed a man to approve of us and the way we were taking care of them in order to survive.
Yeah.
And so we have, it's in our DNA, despite the fact that we have made strides, although not as many as I would have hoped.
Yeah, same here. I totally know.
we certainly, women can do all of those things now. It's still the trauma of that fear of being of actually like being left to die if a man didn't approve of us exists in our DNA still.
Absolutely. And I think that, the first time I was married before, and when I married my first husband, I changed careers because he said I should. And granted, I was not satisfied, right? But it was kind of like that sign of approval. Like, yeah, you should, you need to. And now, like, I can take the leaves without necessarily having to have the seal of approval from Dan. But I became more self-sufficient because I learned to trust myself, and I learned to say, you've got this. And it's great to have that support. But for many women, and I love that you talked about an epidemic, because it really is an epidemic of people pleasing. And we don't talk about it enough. And that's what we do as women, right? We take care of everything, and we say yes to everything, and we put ourselves last. And then it really drains us.
Well, and the tendency, and I think it relates to everything we've spoken about thus far, is that we abandon ourselves. We abandon what we want, who we really are, because we think we have to in order to get ahead, or we have to in order to keep somebody else happy. And that is where we end up feeling so unfulfilled and unhappy.
Being a high achiever, being that person that is always looking to, be the person that is getting all the success. Do you feel that it's harder for us as high achievers to get off that rat race, or that, that hamster wheel, and really say, this hamster wheel doesn't belong for me. It's not the place where I want to be?
I think there's a tendency, at least with my clients, a lot of the time, there's a tendency to, when I talk with my clients about that inner voice, that inner critic voice that can sabotage you, which is really, to me, the crux of starting to shift all of this, because we all have that little voice that sits on our shoulder and says, well, you better not, or what are they going to think? Or
That's
what
right.
happens if this happens? Or you can't do that. That's not going to work. Right. And when we start to identify that voice, a lot of high achievers will say to me, well, but that's how that voice is what keeps me motivated. It's what drives me. Right. And so that, I think, becomes a real issue. There is there's a fear of letting go of that self-flagellation, which is what it really is, because they're afraid they'll lose that motivation, they'll lose that drive.
Yeah. I see that in high achievers, there's also, and I think that there's two sides to this coin, right? We also become the oh my God, look at me, I'm so busy. Or also the one like, oh my God, I'm so busy, poor me, I do it all, nobody helps me, in that martyr kind of mentality. What's the key to breaking free from that?
Well, I think that I'm so busy culture is, again, born of the patriarchal society, right? It's all about how much can you get done? How much can you get done? How much can you get done? And we forget that in addition to what we're doing, it's important how we're being, right? And those two things, the doing and being, are really, and I'm going to get a little woo-woo here on you for a second.
I love it. I love it.
Really,
we do woo-woo here all the time.
Well, the funny thing about this is it is like woo-woo, but if you actually listen and think about it, it makes so much sense. And the being is feminine energy and the doing is masculine energy. And so we tend to live, especially high achievers, so much in our masculine energy of get it done. And as women, we're a little bit nervous about our nurturing, empathetic, vulnerable feminine energy, even though it's proven that these are the components that actually create psychological safety in the workplace.
Mhm.
So it's so important to have a balance. It's not like, I'm not dissing the masculine. Good masculine energy is really important as well, but it's really finding a balance. And we've moved so much into the masculine energy that we've negated the feminine, and we're driving ourselves into the ground because of it,
Yeah, I agree. I was listening to not a show, I guess a YouTube channel. I follow Ali Abdal online, and I just became aware of him the last year, and I'm obsessed. And if you don't know who he is and you're listening to this, you need to go check him out.
Will you put him in the show notes?
Yeah, I will put him in the show notes for sure. But I'll put him below your stuff because I want people to go and check out your stuff first. But Ali, he is probably 31. I mean, like he just turned 30 something not too long ago, early 30s. And his first business was helping other college students get into medical school. He is from the UK. And when he was having his business of helping others, he started to do videos on YouTube. And after he did some videos on YouTube, he started to get very popular and started to monetize his channel. And as a physician in the UK, and he started working as a doctor, he finished medical school and everything. They don't make a lot of money. He was making $45,000 a year as a doctor. He ended up getting a month in YouTube where he had monetized, where he made more money in that month that he made in the whole year. And that's when he made the decision to go, right? And of course, similarly to what we're talking about, again, he's a high achiever. He had some of the doubt, like, oh, people are going to think I'm crazy. I went through medical school. I did all of this. And it's been interesting to see his journey as a successful YouTuber. And the reason I'm bringing it up is the video I was watching from him yesterday. He said, I know that in order for me to get to the next level, I need to surround myself with the next level people. I can't stay here. And this is really why individuals who are high achievers need a coach, need someone to support them through that journey to, what does it mean? And he doesn't mean next level, I'm going to be doing it all. He means next level and be satisfied and be able to have a happy life, not because I'm doing it all and bringing in all the money, but because I have boundaries. I do the things that matter. And I love a lot of that, what he talks about. But here's the thing that really hit me. He said, I encourage you to create your own board of directors, people who are the people that inspired you. So last night I was sitting in bed and I thought, you know what? Yes, I need to make a board of directors of people who are doing the thing that where I want to be, but also that really are my mentors. And I started to make the list and I realized that most of these were guys. Most of these were guys. Not, and then I'm like, okay, who's going to be the woman? There's got to be a woman. And then I realized that that's because this culture, we have to rely on the example of others that mostly are men, because we as women don't trust ourselves enough to do what we need to give ourselves the freedom to listen to that intuition, to listen to what does it mean, right? And define success without having to follow somebody else's formula. I'm not even sure if that even makes sense, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
So, gosh, I have so many thoughts about lots of things you just said. It's funny. So I think men also are better at, I know men are better at putting themselves out there and kind of like saying, here I am, and this is what I'm good at. So it's easier to find them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's easier to be aware of somebody who's making you aware of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would encourage you to like see if you can dig deeper to find those women. They're there. They're there.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, they don't have to be these like huge, names. there are the
Something
women
to admire.
that are here that we're meeting through podcasting, that we're meeting in our select groups of other individuals who are doing the same thing that we're doing. And I think that this is why your work is important for the women that need you and the women that are there and that, we're doing the thing that you were doing maybe a few years ago.
But it makes me think of this whole Andrew Huberman scandal where I don't know if you're aware of any of this, but where
Oh my gosh, I did not hear.
He has no women on his podcast. He has like zero. And a lot of these big men podcasters who have huge audiences, the percentage of women that they interview is minuscule. So men are supporting other men and women have to start to do the same. Right? Like we have to start to really take care of our own more.
Yeah.
And stop supporting the men that don't support women. Because there are men out there who are supportive of women.
Right.
Let's lift them up and have them be our partners. But stop touting, no matter how good they are, if they are misogynistic, even if it's veiled misogynism, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're not completely aware that they're doing it. If once it's pointed out to them, they make no effort to change, we have to stop supporting those people.
I agree. I did not, and I like Andrew Huberman, but I didn't really, I guess, realize that that's huge. And it really reframes for me, like, do I want to, and here's the thought I had with him not too long ago. Like, his morning routine, right, which is very famous for, it's not necessarily a routine I would do.
Right.
And why are we normalizing that we need to do these kind of things and not trusting ourselves?
Well, you just brought up such another interesting point. We've gotten into this culture of, this successful person has this way of doing things, so that will work for me. And I think that's the opposite of what I believe is true, because you have to define what success looks like for you. What does a successful morning feel like and look like for you? It might be so far gone from what Andrew Huberman is doing, right? Like, just because the other thing, a really interesting thing is, he did an episode about alcohol and how.
Yes, I listened to that episode.
Well, there are two women and both of their names are going to totally go out of my brain right now, which is terrible in and of itself. I didn't necessarily expect to be having this conversation with you, but who have books and huge followings and have been talking about this for years.
Absolutely.
Before Andrew Huberman. So and why didn't Andrew Huberman invite them to come on that podcast?
Yeah, 100%. You know what? I remember listening to that. My friend sent it to me because she's been just obsessed with him. And I said to her, I said, I am having a hard time. I can't even have wine right before I go to bed anymore. And she's like, oh, you should listen to this episode. And actually, that's how I found him. And I remember thinking, I think I've heard this from other people. And I not only thought about that, but as I'm doing the show, I've talked to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people, a lot of women in the show that are experts. They're in the trenches doing that. But we go to the man for that because we don't trust ourselves enough.
Yeah. So I think it's really, to me, the other really interesting thing I find about high achievers, and you mentioned this about, you need a coach. There's this feeling of, I need to know what my ROI is going to be. Right. And when you work with a coach, and so much of it is around mindset, people don't know automatically what the ROI is going to be. I can tell you, you'll probably make more money. You will feel better physically and mentally. You will stop burning out. You will have better boundaries. But even my clients, I have a couple of clients, it cracks me up. I had one in particular who would say to me at the end of almost every single session, she would go, Michelle, I swear to God, I saw your name on my calendar this morning, and I thought to myself, I don't have time for this. But I made myself make the time. And the truth is, I don't have time not to do this. It's so clarifying. It creates such intention in my day to day, in my career. But it's so easy to get caught up in the daily grind of all the things we have to do and get done that we forget how we're showing up and who we're being and what's actually important.
Yeah.
And so, that understanding of like what a coach can actually do for you and help you get outside of yourself, it's hard for people to be willing to invest because they just can't imagine why this is so important until they actually start to do the work and start to like really understand that the work you need to do to get what you're wanting is the inner work. The work to get to that next level is, yes, you've gotten here, but what got you here is not what will get you there.
I totally agree with that. And I think that in the very beginning, when I first worked with a coach, I needed someone to make me more productive. I needed someone to make me more check the boxes. And after that, did I get that? Sure. But what I really got was a sense of, who am I? What am I doing? Is this what matters? And, why am I continuing in this path if really it doesn't bring me that joy, right? Or that satisfaction. And the next time I worked with a coach, it was more exploring and managing my emotions, my thoughts in a way that would serve me. And I think that this is definitely one of the explorations that we need to continue to make as women. Who is that person that you normally work with, the person that needs you and that you continue to really help? Because I would imagine that they're an old version of you in some point.
Yeah. There's often a feeling of either an awareness of I'm getting in my own way, but I don't know how to get out of my own way, or I feel stuck and I'm spinning my wheels. Or that sense of why doesn't like everything's going the way I wanted it to go? Why doesn't it feel the way I want it to feel? Right. So, I often end up working with a lot of women on leadership in their organization because they realize they've just kind of followed the leadership that they've seen come before them. And that's not how they actually want to do things. So I work with a lot of women to help them actually discover, how do I want to lead? How do I stay true to myself and lead the way so that I'm not betraying myself, so that I'm staying true to my values and I'm leading in an intentional way, not just on automatic. Sometimes that has women changing jobs. Sometimes that has women starting their own businesses. Sometimes that has them not doing anything except for changing how they're showing up in their position and realizing how much their mindset and their lack of boundaries was contributing to the way things were going. And that simple shift allows them to see their job and the culture in their organization in a whole new light. So, the outcome of what happens when I work with different women is so varied, but it's really that awareness of something doesn't feel the way I want it to feel. And I know there's more out there for me. I know there's more out there for me.
That self-awareness is really the first step in a lot of the different things and journeys. Tell me more about the art of compassionate command.
So as I worked with women over time, one of the things that I really discovered was that in addition to the lack of confidence or the lack of self-trust, there's also such a lack of self-compassion. And those things, that feeling of command of yourself and of your life goes hand in hand with the feeling of compassion. And so as I started to discover the different things I would do with women to help them kind of step into that power, I realized you can't have one without the other. Because if you just have command without the compassion part, it tends to veer into toxic masculinity a little bit.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you only have compassion without the command, it can get overly emotional. It can veer into toxic femininity. So it's really that it's the balance of the masculine and feminine energy. It's the yin and the yang. It's that balance. And I always say, I don't believe in work-life balance, but I do believe in that balance of your energy. And so when I say command, it's not about being in command of other people. It's not like an army general commander, it's being in command of yourself, of every room that you walk into. It's about knowing who you are. It's about that self-trust.
Yeah.
With compassion for yourself and the fact that no matter how confident you are, no matter how much of an expert you're a human being. And
I
if
love
you're
that.
constantly needing perfection and needing everything to be a certain way and leaving no space for yourself to make mistakes, you can't level up. We only level up through making mistakes. And you can't, you also are not going to be able to have that empathy and vulnerability that's so imperative when in working with other people. That creates trust. And so it's a framework that I have that I go through. It's kind of the base of what I go through with my clients to help them get to know their truest selves better, to start to trust themselves again, to be aware of that inner chatter that gets in the way, and to rebuild that relationship with themselves so that they can find self-compassion. Because seriously, if somebody walked around talking to us the way that we talk to ourselves, we would have a restraining order slapped on them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We do it all the time.
It's so easy to fall into that, and I'm starting to see, I have a 10-year-old niece, and I'm starting to see that evolution of her going from free and carefree to like starting to question, starting to be more apprehensive, like, oh, is it okay to say that? And measure yourself. And and I look at my other nieces who are in their 20s, and I see a lot of the same pattern. You said something that I've never really heard the phrase before, but I want us to explore. What is toxic femininity? And let's unpack that a little bit.
So we hear about toxic masculinity all the time, right? But there is such a thing as toxic femininity.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me about toxic femininity is when so many women are afraid of being called too emotional at work, right?
Yep.
I actually think that what they're afraid about is what has shown up as toxic femininity. When I don't think when we are vulnerable and sharing our emotions, we get emotional. That is different than being reactive. So toxic femininity tends to be chaos, tremendous overwhelm, overly emotional. So letting your emotions overtake. Emotions are so imperative. And giving yourself the space to be with your emotions without reacting from your emotions is also imperative.
Or judging ourselves for having those emotions.
100%.
Because that's where we go to.
Yes, there's also a tendency to not want certain emotions, right? And that's where
we run away.
But so there, that constant chaos, overwhelm, the feeling of like, constant going, but not in a way of trying to take care of everything all the time, the martyrdom that can come. These are traits of toxic femininity.
Yeah.
And we know what the traits of toxic masculinity are, right?
Right.
Dominance,
Yeah.
control, oh God, now I can't even think of them. I mean, it's dominance and control, pompousness, like, not just
Yeah.
a sense of confidence, but actually like
It perpetuates that domination,
it's
basically.
that idea of power that so many women shy away from because it's been power over, as Brene Brown refers to it,
Yeah.
rather than power with, right? That's toxic masculinity. And I think I would be very surprised if somebody hearing that doesn't understand exactly what I mean when I say that.
Absolutely. And I think that our goal as women is always to, especially in these circles where there's other women, right? If we're sending the elevator back down, if we create that awareness for ourselves, then we're giving permission to others to do the same.
That's
And
exactly
this
right.
is why, for me, my work, personal, is always, yes, I want to get better, be better, do better. But I also know that if I do the work for myself, I can definitely share with others, lead others, give the tools, the tips. And this is what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, you're changing the conversation, and that starts to change that DNA that we talked about for future generations. When women start to respond differently, to show up differently, to not worry so much about taking care of everybody else, then our daughters and granddaughters and nieces and and great granddaughters, they're gonna have it that much less.
Yeah, I agree. And that's our work. And that's what keeps me at least going. Michelle, I could probably talk to you for another hour, but I'm going to be sensitive to your time. You've been incredibly gracious, and I everybody's incredibly gracious with their time, and I'm so grateful for that. How can people continue this conversation with you? Unpack a little more, and then where do they connect with you?
So, you can find me on my website and connect with me there. I am on Instagram and LinkedIn also. I'm playing more with LinkedIn these days and I'm having fun with it.
Okay. I'm going to go hang out with you on LinkedIn then.
And you can always, if somebody is interested in connecting with me and finding out more about coaching, you can always shoot me an email through my website and we can set up a time to talk and see if it might be a good match for you.
Give us the website. I know what it is. I have it in front of me.
It's michellepollak.com.
Yeah, that's right.
And the other thing is I've got a fun little, we talked a lot about people pleasing. So many of my clients find themselves saying yes when they really want to say no to things.
Yes.
And that is a huge shift that I make. And so I've got a fun guide to stop saying yes when you really mean no.
I love that. I think that's a great resource. And I hope people go and get it, because think about it. How many times are you driving to the grocery store to buy the cupcakes that you didn't want to make or bring, and then you're going to beat yourself up for making the cupcakes or not making them from scratch and still saying yes when you really meant no? It's been a joy. It's so fun. I had a little thought I'm not going to share on the podcast. I'm going to tell you after when we're off, because I think that, we need more Michelle in our lives. So thank you for being here. I am so grateful for the knowledge and wisdom, and really for you sharing your experience and giving us some thought-provoking things to unpack, like
Thanks, Julie.
toxic femininity. And I want to encourage you, the listener. There's a lot of things that we went through here. I want you to think about what is the one takeaway? What is the one thing that you're going to maybe start to shift or pivot in your life, so that what we talked about here, maybe you learn to say no to other people. Maybe you really find that community where others are doing the things that you want to aspire to. Or maybe you share this podcast with somebody who you know will benefit a lot from it. So thank you again. Connect with Michelle online, everybody. We're going to have all her links in here. And again, thank you for tuning into the show. Don't forget, my friends and Michelle, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Thanks for listening to Casa De Confidence. We thank you for listening, and if you want more, go to CasaDeConfidencePod.com. Check Julie out on her socials as Julie DeLucca-Collins. And you can also check out her website at GoConfidentlyCoaching.com. Have a great week, and don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Hi, everybody. I know that sometimes we get very lonely in this entrepreneur journey, and I want to invite you to join us into our limited time only Purposeful You Mastermind. For many of us entrepreneurs, we believe that we can do it all, but the reality is that doing it alone only creates a lot of overwhelm. So join us at the Purposeful You Mastermind. You can find out more information by going to bit.ly/Julie's Mastermind. This is going to be the place where you are able to then unlock your full potential and achieve long-term success for your business. Push you behind your current limits, expand your connections, discover new ideas, and implement them with confidence. You're going to get the support in all aspects and transforming you to the six-figure business you've been looking for. Pause and get off the hamster wheel if you've been spinning around. This is a time where you can get that support from like-minded entrepreneurs that are here to join you in your journey. Together, we can challenge the assumptions and land the speaking engagements and opportunities we want to grow our business and make an impact in the lives of people. See you then. Remember, you can find the mastermind at bit.ly, Julie's Mastermind.